another design we're doing. Next design with a class 3 modification 1. We will also be doing a metal partial denture, as well as looking at how it would differ or change with an acrylic partial denture. Always following the steps. All the models for partial dentures must be surveyed. The undercuts must be identified, as well as the guide planes. And then we start following the steps of support, and support will be provided onto my saddle areas. Next to my saddle areas on my abutment teeth, I've got a premolar abutment, so I'll use a distal rest, because that distal rest is next to my saddle. Mesial rest on my molar, and on this one I will use a cingulum rest again. The next step is to provide retention for my denture. So in this case I will use my circumferential clasps again. On both of these molars, one arm that's engaging the undercut and the reciprocation that is formed by the same clasps. On premolars, because they are big saddles, I'm going to use additional clasp on the 3-4 as well as the 4-3. And here I'm going to use a soldered clasp, because I cannot use a circumferential clasp. I have to provide reciprocation. I'm going to use a C-clasp that is soldered again on my canine, and I have to provide reciprocation. So my clasp is engaging mesiobuccal undercut on the 4-3, mesiobuccal undercut on the 3-4. I've provided reciprocation. The next step is now to connect the separate components, and here I'm using a lingual plate again. I'm connecting the separate components of the denture. I'm indicating my retention holes to which my acrylic will be attached, and my finish line. Look whether I have provided horizontal stability, whether I have connected all the components. I have a minimum of 1, 2, 3, 4 rests, and remember, rests are always placed immediately next to the saddle on my abutment surfaces. I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4 clasps, and in this case I've got additional clasp on the premolar and the canine because of the length of the saddle. So I've used a circumferential clasp on my molars, and I've used soldered C clasp on my anterior abutment teeth. This will be my class 3 modification 1. Another design would have been to use a ring clasp. In this design, I've used a ring clasp engaging mesiobuccal undercut on this abutment, because when I've surveyed the model, I probably found a bigger undercut mesiobuccally, and this tooth was probably mesially tilted. I've used my same circumferential clasp as well as my soldered clasp on my metal partial denture. If this was an acrylic partial denture, and just to indicate that we can design acrylic partial denture, although it's not the first choice, I have my acrylic partial denture. I've used a C clasp engaging distal buccal undercut on the molar in the 3rd quadrant. I've used a C clasp on my premolar with a distal occlusal rest and a mesial occlusal rest. I've used a C clasp on my canine with my cingulum rest, and I've used a ring clasp on my molar made of stainless steel as well as a mesial occlusal rest. Just to refresh our memory, lower partial dentures, metal is always the first choice. In acrylic partial dentures, the challenge usually is the joint between the metal, which is the stainless steel, and the acrylic. It's always a mechanical joint, and that is usually a weak area where we have mechanical two different materials as the stainless steel clasp and the acrylic that have to be attached to each other. And if we look at what it will look like in practical situation, this patient, we have used a lingual plate. You can see we've used a ring clasp where we have a mesial rest as well as a distal rest, and the distal rest is usually to prevent the clasp from fracturing. Here again we've got a soldered C-clasp and we have a lingual plate for that design. Here in another design, we've also used a lingual plate, and because the patient has diastemas, the technician actually have to clear so that when the patient speaks and talks, we don't see the grey metal shining anteriorly. So we have a lingual plate that has been cleared where they have diastemas, and here again we've got our C-clasp that's attached to the denture, is soldered on, and in the third quadrant we have a gingerly approaching clasp.